Welcome back. So do you remember that we had already spoken about what is going to happen inside the cell when the digestive system and the respiratory system will bring their particular components, their respective components inside the cell. Now come on, help me in telling. What will happen when the digestive system will digest the food molecules that we are eating? They will convert the food molecules into its component nutrients. And what were the component nutrients? Were they dal, rice, chapati? Well, of course, no. They were broken down into carbohydrates, proteins, fats. Now the question is that carbohydrates, proteins, fats, were these small molecules? Absolutely correct. No, they were big molecules. But can those big molecules be instantly utilized? Well, of course, that becomes a big question. And that's wherein we had understood that during digestion, all of these carbohydrates, proteins, fats and vitamins, they are all broken down into smaller components. Now, what are they broken down into? So, carbohydrates are broken down into glucose. That is its simplest form. Fats are broken down into fatty acids. That's its simplest form. And proteins are broken down into amino acids. Well, that is their simplest form. So all of these simplest form, they come together inside the cell after digestion through the blood. Yes. And that's wherein we understood that the digestive system and the circulatory system are so intricately, so delicately connected, and none of them can work without each other, right? So that is how we saw what digestion was all about. Very good. Now help me with respiration. We know that when you're talking about respiration, it's not just inhalation of oxygen. Come on with me. And exhalation of oxygen. Well, do we exhale oxygen? Well, of course, no. We exhale carbon dioxide. So it's not just inhalation of oxygen and exhalation of carbon dioxide, but it is what will happen when this oxygen will go inside the body. How will that oxygen travel to various parts of the body? Well, that is wherein we had understood that the oxygen that we take in, it gets exchanged in the alveoli, and alveoli are covered by capillaries, and these capillaries are the ones which are going to exchange carbon dioxide and oxygen, and this oxygen which enters into the blood will then be carried to different cells. So what will happen to the cell now? Now the cell is going to have the components majorly glucose, and these will now interact with the oxygen which has come from the respiratory system. Well, that is all what is going to happen, and that's wherein we understood that energy is produced, because respiration is not just breathing in oxygen and breathing out carbon dioxide, but it's also the production of energy. And when we talk about production of energy, we always say that energy which is produced is because of a step-by-step oxidation. Why oxidation? Because the food molecules are being oxidized, because the food molecules are reacting with the oxygen that is coming in through respiration. And that's wherein the energy which is produced is of two types. Now let's see what two types are they. Well, they are either of the direct type or of the indirect type. Now, to explain this direct and indirect, let me give you a very small example. Let's say, if I am giving you some amount of money and I'm asking you to utilize that. Well, is that a direct money? Well, of course, yes. Will you utilize all of it the way you want? Well, of course, yes. And at the same time, let me say that I'm giving your elder sibling, either your brother or your sister, the money, and I'm asking you to take it from them. So will they give you the entire money? Well, of course, no, they will not. They will keep some amount for themselves and then they will give you. So is that a direct money? Will you spend all of what is given to you? Well, of course, no. So something which you can spend immediately will be direct. And similar is the case with energy. When an energy produced inside the cell can be spent immediately in doing various activities. For example, now when I'm talking, you are taking a lot of efforts in listening to what I'm talking. So your brain is continuously working, and this continuous working of brain also requires direct energy, because the moment your body is producing energy, that is being immediately spent by your brain for doing the activity of thinking. Yes. And for me, my body is producing direct energy and I am utilizing this energy in speaking. So that is nothing but direct energy. Energy which is produced by various activities and the cell is immediately utilizing it. Well, that is what is called as direct energy. Now, when you talk about direct energy, well, that in the cell is present in the form of an energy-rich compound which is called as adenosine triphosphate, which is also known as the ATP molecule. Now, thinking of ATP, we have studied mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. Why? Because mitochondria produces this energy-rich compound which is called as the adenosine triphosphate. So this ATP molecule is the one which is going to be your direct energy, and this direct energy is going to make sure that the amount of work that you're doing should not be very lousy or should not be without energy. You should give 100%, and that is only possible when this direct energy is present. Now, since our cell has direct energy, it also has indirect energy, and this indirect energy, the cell cannot spend it directly for doing activities. Why? Because this indirect energy is in the form of two coenzymes, namely NADH2, nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, and FADH2, that is flavin adenine dinucleotide. So that's NADH2 and FADH2. Now, why is this called as an indirect energy? Because these two coenzymes will be converted into ATP and then be utilized. Well, that is why it is called as indirect energy. So this is like your elder sibling taking some amount of money and giving you the rest. Well, yes. So this 2 coenzyme is going to get divided, or rather they are going to get converted into ATP, and then they are going to be utilized by the cell, and that's why you call them as indirect energy. Now, when we have spoken about energy, we know it's of 2 types, direct and indirect. Now, let's see how it is formed. So now, if you remember in the earlier module, we understood that yes, the energy production is not a one-step process, rather, it is many steps. How many? 3. So, they are 3-step processes, and the 3-step processes, the first one is called as glycolysis. Now, when you talk about this word glycolysis, well, this word itself has a big meaning. Let's take the word glycolysis and let's break it down as glyco and lysis. Lysis means to break down something. Well, yes, hydrolysis. You must have heard this word. Hydro means water and lysis means breakdown. So breakdown of water is called as hydrolysis. Now take this word and compare it with glycolysis. Glyco means glucose, and glucose is the basic unit of, absolutely correct, carbohydrate. So this glucose has to be broken down in order to produce energy, and that is why we have this first process which is called as the glycolysis process. So this glycolysis process is also called as EMP pathway, because there were these 3 people, Emden, Meyerhoff and Parnis, who created this entire pathway, who discovered this pathway inside the cell, and that is why in their honor we have kept the name of glycolysis as EMP pathways. What is EMP? It's Embden, Meyerhoff and Parnas pathway. Now when you talk about glycolysis, well, this glycolysis will happen in the cytoplasm of the cell. Now, when you talk about the cytoplasm, it is nothing but the liquid portion of the cell. And this liquid portion of the cell, which you can see, is the very place wherein your glucose, your fatty acids and your proteins will be present. Your amino acids will be present and they will interact with the oxygen. But the thing is that glycolysis is only and only specific to glucose. Amino acids from the proteins and fatty acids from the fats will never ever undergo glycolysis. Why? Because glycolysis is a process in which only and only glucose molecule is oxidized. And where is it oxidized? Well, it is oxidized inside the cytoplasm of the cell. Yes, so the first step process in the formation of energy, which is nothing but glycolysis, is only and only specific to glucose molecule. And secondly, it is going to take place in the cytoplasm. Now, if I ask you a question, will fatty acids and amino acids undergo glycolysis? Then your answer would be no, no. Why? Because this is only and only specific to glucose molecule. Now, let's see how glycolysis occurs. So, inside the cytoplasm of the cell, we have glucose. So, can you see over here how many circles are present? Come on, let's count. We have 1, we have 2, we have 3, we have 4, 5 and 6. So it means that glucose is a 6-carbon sugar. What is it? It's a 6-carbon sugar. Now this 6-carbon sugar, one molecule of glucose will be broken down in the presence of oxygen to give us pyruvic acid. And this pyruvic acid is a 3-carbon molecule. Now, 6-carbon glucose will be broken down into exactly half. That's 3-carbon pyruvic acid, 3-carbon pyruvic acid. And then this 3-carbon pyruvic acid, how many molecules did we get? We got 2 molecules. So in this case, what are we getting? So let's create a balance sheet. What are we getting? In this entire thing, we are getting direct energy in the form of 2 ATP molecules, coenzymes, that is NADH2, which is nothing but indirect form of energy, which is nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide. We are getting a byproduct, and that's nothing but 2 molecules of water. Now, this 3-carbon molecule of pyruvic acid will be further broken down in another set of a reaction, which is going to be linked with glycolysis, and it will be broken down into a 2-carbon acetyl coenzyme A. Now this 2-carbon acetyl coenzyme A, which is present, is now going to be utilized in the further reactions. And while this is going to fetch us another kind of a coenzyme, that is 2-NADH2, which is an indirect energy. And of course a byproduct, which is nothing but carbon dioxide. So it is this very carbon dioxide which we are releasing. Now this is just a gist of glycolysis. So here you just need to remember 3 things, and that is cytoplasm will have 6-carbon molecule, that's glucose, which is going to be further broken down into 3-carbon molecules of pyruvic acid. And this 3-carbon molecules of pyruvic acid in another set of reaction will be broken down into 2-carbon molecule acetyl coenzyme A. And this 2-carbon molecule acetyl coenzyme A will now be entering into another set of reaction, which is nothing but Krebs cycle. Now let's try to look at this entire reaction in a wholesome manner. So we have our cell. Now this cell has glucose molecules, And this glucose molecule is entering in the cell by the breakdown of food molecules during digestion. And how is the food molecules breaking down? Well, they are breaking down into carbohydrates, and carbohydrates are being broken down into glucose molecules. And this glucose is now present inside the cytoplasm of the cell. Can you see the cytoplasm of the cell? Well, yes. Now, this cytoplasm of the cell is connected with the blood capillaries, and in the blood capillaries we have oxygen molecule. Now, this oxygen molecule is coming as a result of gaseous exchange in the alveoli. And this oxygen, which when enters inside the cell, will now undergo the reaction of glycolysis, in which we have the 6-carbon molecule of glucose. And this 6-carbon molecule of glucose will now undergo breakdown by the process of glycolysis. So glyco means glucose and lysis means breakdown. And this breakdown is initiated by oxygen, which is present inside the cytoplasm. Now, it's not just the oxygen, it's also a set of many enzymes, which are nothing but biological catalysts, which will speed up the chemical reaction. Well, that is what is happening. And this oxygen, along with a lot of enzymes, will break down this 3-carbon molecule exactly from the center. And when it breaks down, it fetches us 2 molecules of 3-carbon compound. So did you see over here? Breakdown has occurred, and this breakdown is because of oxygen. And this breakdown, which is because of oxygen, is therefore termed as oxidation of glucose molecules. And because it is breaking down, because the glucose molecule is breaking down, the entire process is called as glycolysis. Well, this 3-carbon molecule is now named as pyruvic acid, which is how many carbon compound? Well, it's a 3-carbon compound. Glucose, 6-carbon compound getting divided into pyruvic acid, which is a 3-carbon compound. So now just mathematically understand, if glucose is 6-carbon compound and pyruvic acid is a 3-carbon compound, how many molecules of pyruvic acid are we going to get? Well, we get 2 molecules of pyruvic acid. And in this entire protocol, we get ATP molecule, which is nothing but a direct energy. Now, this entire thing is also going to produce indirect energy. So, come on, let's take another revision. We have 6-carbon glucose. This will undergo the process of glycolysis. And in glycolysis, we will be forming 3-carbon pyruvic acid molecules. How many molecules? 2 molecules of 3-carbon pyruvic acid. And this is also going to release indirect form of energy, and that is NADH2, which is nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide. And also we are going to release another byproduct, which is nothing but water. So until here, this entire process, we have created 3 molecules. In this entire process, we have created ATP molecule, we have created NADH2 molecule, and we have created H2O molecule. So these are 2 molecules each. Now this pyruvic acid, which is formed, will enter into the mitochondrial matrix. So this is the mitochondria. Now this mitochondria has a liquid proportion inside that, and that liquid proportion is called as a mitochondrial matrix. And inside the mitochondrial matrix, this pyruvic acid will enter and it will get converted into acetyl coenzyme A. Now this conversion of pyruvic acid to acetyl coenzyme A, well, that is a link reaction, and this link reaction is between glycolysis, which is the first step in energy production, and Krebs cycle, which is the second step in energy production. So we have glycolysis, which takes place in the cytoplasm. We have Krebs cycle, which will be taking place inside the mitochondria. And that is why there has to be a link between them. And the link is conversion of pyruvic acid to acetyl coenzyme A. Now pay attention over here. We have 3-carbon pyruvic acid, which is getting converted into 2-carbon acetyl coenzyme A. Now, 3-carbon pyruvic acid is getting converted into 2-carbon acetyl coenzyme A. Well, we are now wondering, where did that 1 carbon go? Now, since we are wondering where did that 1 carbon go, well, it will come out in the form of carbon dioxide. And this carbon dioxide is another byproduct that we saw. It is from this entire protocol. Pyruvic acid getting converted into acetyl coenzyme A. 3 carbon getting converted into 2 carbon molecule. And 1 carbon is released out as carbon dioxide because of oxidation. And in this process, we again have 2 molecules each. So glucose, which was a 6-carbon molecule, broke down into 3-carbon molecule of pyruvic acid. And we had 2 molecules of pyruvic acid. So this 2 into pyruvic acid will get converted. Each of the pyruvic acid will get converted into acetyl coenzyme A. So if initially we had 2 molecules of pyruvic acid, in here also we are going to have 2 molecules of acetyl coenzyme A. And these 2 molecules of acetyl coenzyme A will fetch us 2 molecules of carbon dioxide, because each pyruvic acid, 3-carbon pyruvic acid, 2 molecules will be broken down into 2-carbon acetyl coenzyme A, leaving 1 carbon dioxide each from 1 molecule. So in totality, we have 2 carbon dioxide molecules. So even this link reaction has the production of 2 carbon dioxide molecules with release of another energy, and that is indirect form of energy, again NADH2, which is again going to be how many molecules? 2 molecules. So this is the link between glycolysis and the Krebs cycle. Now, when you talk about an entire flow sheet of glycolysis and the link reaction, we have 6-carbon glucose reacting with oxygen and a lot of enzymes. So we have 1 molecule, 1 into means 1 molecule of glucose, which is 6-carbon molecule, breaking down as 3-carbon pyruvic acid. So how many molecules? We have 2 into means 2 molecules of 3-carbon pyruvic acid. And these 2 molecules of 3-carbon pyruvic acid is getting converted into 2 molecules of 2-carbon acetyl coenzyme A. Now in this process, there is release of 2 ATP molecules, 2 NADH molecules, 2 H2O molecules. So this was glycolysis. And from pyruvic to acetyl becomes a link reaction in which there was release of carbon dioxide and release of NADH2. So we have 2 molecules of each. Now let's try to take this as a balance sheet. So we have this 1 molecule of 6-carbon glucose, which is going to break down into 2 ATP? No. Which is going to first break down into 3-carbon pyruvic acid, because ATP is a product which is forming. It is not being broken down into ATP. It is forming a product ATP by breaking down into pyruvic acid. So we have 2 molecules of 3-carbon pyruvic acid. We have 2 molecules of ATP now being produced, 2 molecules of NADH2, which is an indirect form of energy, and 1 byproduct, that's H2O. So we have 2 molecules of ATP, that is direct energy. We have 2 molecules of NADH2, which is a form of indirect energy, and we have 2 molecules of byproduct, that's water. This was glycolysis. Now entering into the link reaction between glycolysis in the cytoplasm and Krebs cycle in the mitochondria, we have 2 molecules of 3-carbon pyruvic acid, and this 2 in 2, which means 2 molecules of 3-carbon pyruvic acid breaking down into NADH2 and carbon dioxide. Well, no, they are being formed. It is being broken down into 2 molecules. So 2 molecules of 2-carbon acetyl coenzyme A, and during this process, what are we fetching? We are getting 2 molecules of NADH2 and 2 molecules of carbon dioxide. So this is the entire part of glycolysis and link reaction. So this is wherein glycolysis and link reaction end by producing 2 ATP from 1 glucose molecule. Now when we go further, we have the second step of energy production. So the first step was glycolysis, which took place in the cytoplasm. Now the molecules that they have formed will enter into the mitochondria and perform Krebs cycle. Now Krebs cycle is also called as citric acid cycle and tricarboxylic acid cycle for an obvious reason that we'll be talking later. But the question is, why is it given as the name Krebs cycle? Well, it is because it was discovered by this great scientist, Sir Hans Krebs. And that is why in his honor, we have kept the name as Krebs cycle. So salute to him. Today we know what Krebs cycle is. Now when you talk about Krebs cycle, we have acetyl coenzyme A, which is a 2-carbon molecule. And this 2-carbon molecule is being broken down into, well, let's see what it is. So we have this acetyl coenzyme A, 2 molecules inside the mitochondria, getting converted into a particular product, and that is under the cycle Krebs, tricarboxylic acid or citric acid. Well, these are all the names of Krebs cycle. Now let's see what Krebs cycle is. We have acetyl coenzyme A together. Now the reaction in the Krebs cycle is only and only going to pertain to acetyl part, not the CoA part. So the reaction, the oxidation, this is again an oxidation reaction. So oxidation is only going to happen with acetyl molecule. The CoA molecule will be released as it is. So this acetyl comes over here, CoA is released by the process of oxidation. Now this acetyl molecule is further broken down into the first stable product of the entire cycle, and that is nothing but citric acid. Now, when you're talking about citric acid being the first ever stable product of the Krebs cycle, this is also called as tricarboxylic acid. Now the question is, why is it called as tricarboxylic acid? And for that, we have the figure. Now we know the word carboxylic acid means the term carbon dioxide with a double bond with another bond with an OH. It means COOH. Well, that is what carboxylic acid means. And just look at the figure. You will find C double bond OH, C double bond OH, C double bond OH. There are 3 molecules of carboxylic acid in this entire figure or the entire molecular structure of citric acid. And that is why it is called as tricarboxylic acid. So now if there's a question that why is Krebs cycle called as a citric acid cycle, then the answer is that citric acid is the first stable product of the Krebs cycle. And why is it called as tricarboxylic acid cycle? Because citric acid contains 3 molecules of carboxylic acid, and that is why it is also called as tricarboxylic acid cycle. Now this citric acid will further go and divide into many molecules, and this molecule then will again react with acetyl coenzyme A to release the coenzyme A part. Acetyl molecule will form citric acid, and this citric acid will then further undergo a lot of other processes. Now there is one thing which is extra which I would like to tell you. We know that acetyl is a 2-carbon molecule. Just count the number of carbons in citric acid. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Citric acid is a 6-carbon molecule. Acetyl was a 2-carbon molecule, and we had 2 molecules of acetyl. So where did the other 4 molecules of carbon came from? Well, they came from another kind of reaction. They came from another kind of a compound which combines with acetyl to form citric acid, and then they undergo breakdown to again form acetyl. And that's wherein the cycle continues. Now, in this entire cycle, a lot of indirect form of energy is produced and a lot of byproducts are produced. So we have carbon dioxide which is being released. We have indirect energy which is NADH2. We have another form of indirect energy which is FADH2, and another form of byproduct, that's water. So these are the kinds of molecules that are being released during the Krebs cycle. One thing you have to understand, that Krebs cycle undergoes or takes place inside the matrix of the mitochondria, wherein the reaction is only and only specific to the acetyl part of the CoA. CoA is released as it is. Acetyl combines with somebody else, forms a 6-carbon citric acid. So this 2-carbon acetyl combines with another compound of 4 carbons, and 4 plus 2, 6 forms citric acid. Citric acid contains 3 molecules of carboxylic acid, and that is why it is called as tricarboxylic acid. And this then undergoes various stages of oxidation in which it releases 2 forms of indirect energy and 2 forms of byproduct. Now let's see what we get. Now in this entire Krebs cycle, we get direct energy in the form of ATP, we get coenzymes in the form of NADH2, we get another form of coenzyme in the form of FADH2. Now this is also an indirect energy. Now if you can see over here, one NADH2 molecule will indirectly give us 3 ATP molecules, and one FADH2 molecule will give us 2 ATP molecules. And byproduct which is given out is water and carbon dioxide. Well, it is this carbon dioxide which is going to be released out of the body. Well, it is this carbon dioxide which will enter into the bloodstream. It will go to the alveoli, get exchanged and be breathed out during our normal breathing protocols or the procedures. Well, that is how Krebs cycle occurs. Now, last stage of energy production is the electron transfer chain, which again happens inside the mitochondria. Now, this electron transfer chain, as the name suggests, it's a procedure in which all forms of indirect energy inside the mitochondria will get converted into direct energy and give you lots and lots of ATP. So all the indirect energies, that is FADH2 and NADH2 that we have got, is getting converted into direct energy. Now this mitochondria has its own structure. We have the outer membrane, we have the inner membrane. Now inner membrane is folded into these finger-like structures. Can you see over here? Yeah, the finger-like structures which are called as the cristae. And this cristae has molecules. Let's see what they are. But before that, let's see that NADH2 and FADH2 will now undergo oxidation to form 3 molecules of ATP. That will be given by NADH2, and 2 molecules of ATP, which will be given by FADH2. Now this entire protocol will again release a lot of water. So this is the smallest kind of a reaction that we can see. Now we'll understand this in detail. So we have the mitochondria. In the mitochondria, we have the cristae, and on the cristae, we have these lollipop kind of structures. Can you see this? Yes. So it is with a stalk and it is having a head. So this portion which is attached to the cristae is called as the stalk, and this is called as the head. Well, this cristae has this lollipop-like structures also called as the F1 particles, and these F1 particles are the sites for electron transfer chain. Now, when you talk about electron transfer chain, well, it is going to have a membrane like this, and these are going to be the complexes. these complexes are the ones which are responsible for the conversion of one molecule of NADH2 into 3 molecules of ATP by the transfer of electrons, and 1 molecule of FADH2 into 2 molecules of ATP by the transfer of electrons. So these electrons will jump from complex to complex, complex to complex, complex to complex, and then convert all this NADH2 and FADH2 into 3 ATPs and 2 ATPs respectively. And that is why we call it as electron transfer chain. Why do you say it like that? It is only because of one reason, and the reason is very simple. The reason is that this electron transfer chain is converting all the indirect energy into direct energy just by transferring the electrons from one complex to the other inside the mitochondria on the F1 particles. And what you get is a byproduct, that's water, and this water is released in the form of water vapor when we are breathing out. So when we are breathing out, it's not just carbon dioxide, but it is also huge amounts of water vapor that you're breathing out. You can do a very simple exercise. You can take a steel glass or a steel bowl and put it over your mouth and try to exhale. You will see a moist something has developed. Well, that moisture which has developed is nothing but the water vapor which is coming out. And where is this water vapor and carbon dioxide coming out from? Well, they are coming out from these reactions which are happening inside the cell. Now let's see this aerobic respiration in which huge amounts of oxygen is utilized. How is it going to give us ATP, and how many ATPs are going to be produced? So we have one molecule of glucose. The first stage, glycolysis, the source of direct energy, that's ATP, is 2. We have 2 molecules of NADH2 which is produced, which will fetch us 3 molecules of ATP each. So 3 2s are 6. So we have 6 ATPs. So in glycolysis, how many ATPs did we get? We got 8 ATPs just in glycolysis. We have the pyruvate oxidation, that is a link reaction, and in this we produce 2 NADH2 in which we got 6 ATPs. Here there was no direct energy formation, it was only indirect. Now we undergo into the Krebs cycle, also called as tricarboxylic, also called as citric acid, and this is going to give us direct energy in the form of 2 ATPs. Indirect energy, that is, it is going to produce 6 NADH molecules. Yes, and 6 3s are 18 because 1 NADH2 gives 3 ATP molecules. So it is going to give us 18 molecules, and then we also had FADH2 and we have produced 2 FADH2. And this is going to fetch us 4 molecules of ATP. Why? Because 1 FADH2 is going to give us 2 molecules of ATP. So 2 2s are 4. Last but not the least, we have now the totality. And in this totality, we find that the entire kind of a system, that is 2 plus 6 plus 6 plus 2 plus 18 plus 4, will fetch us 38 ATPs, including the electron transport chain. So all the 3 kind of the reactions will give us 38 ATPs from 1 glucose molecule, and this is the direct energy that we are going to get.